Preparing to live stream the meeting.
Look at that.
Okay.
And we mute the sound from the YouTube, and we are at 11 a.m. sharp.
Did you start recording?
And, well, the YouTube is recording. Shall I start recording?
No, as long as, just check that the YouTube is really recording.
Well, the YouTube is live,
Okay.
you know, and the live stream automatically records.
Okay.
So I don't see any need to record onto this computer, although I can. Should I do that also, just in case?
No, the YouTube, you use the YouTube
Okay.
features more than I do. I didn't know it automatically did it.
Yeah, it is. So let's get this party started. I want to welcome everybody to Community Church of Boston, and I want to welcome them with something very special that has been my guardian angel all this summer. There's only one problem, which is that my son uses my phone and took about 50 pictures. Okay, here we go. That's the Chiweedle. This is the
In half an hour.
This is the Chiwee.
And the Chewy.
Then there's the about 20 other ones that he has. I've been it's every morning. It's called the Carolina Wren, and Karen tells me that it's the male that sings and sings on and on every morning and every evening, and he hasn't left yet, even though the fall is coming. Carolina Wren, to start out our morning at Community Church. Welcome, everybody. This virtual thing is kind of cool in that we have a whole lineup of wonderful players from all over the place in this fall. This fall's schedule. We have, for example, next Sunday, Roy Zimmerman joining us from California. We have, after that, Dean Stevens joining us from right here. And we have Magpie joining us from upstate New York, November 1st for Jill Stein's talk. And then we have Alastair Mook from Medford. We have Reggie Harris from Philadelphia. We have David Rovix from Portland, Oregon. So there's and Emma's Revolution from California into the month of November. It's a wonderful thing. We can call in the music. It's not like being together alive right here in this lonely auditorium, but it's something, and it's a wonderful thing. So as the morning progresses, I'll tell you more about our fall schedule, which, by the way, we just got a newsletter out. If you haven't received this newsletter, let me know, and I will send you one either physically or virtually. We've got it on a PDF. We can email it to you, or we can send you one by U.S. mail. I want to welcome everybody to Community Church of Boston in our 100th anniversary, our 100th season. We are joined by Cosy Sheridan and Charlie Koch. Charlie, did I say your last name right? Koch? Yes? You are muted, and do I need to unmute you? No. Can we hear you?
Hi, hello, can you hear
Yes, now, yes, all right.
me? Here we are. All right.
This, in my pantheon of songwriting goddesses, Cosy Sheridan is among the top of the triangle of the pantheon. I got more acquainted and friendly with Charlie and Cosy 2 summers ago when I got a chance to be at the Summer Acoustic Music Week on Lake Winnipesaukee, and I sort of trailed them around to songwriting workshops and to performance workshops, and we have since had them at the church live to sing, and now we have them right here. It's just a pleasure to have you again, and will you start us out with a wonderful song?
We'd love to. Good morning, everybody. We're so
Morning. The volume's a little low.
loud. Is that better? Is that better?
No.
No, it's not.
Too loud? Is that what you're saying?
No? A little more.
Okay. We're
That-
coming
that's
to you from southwestern New Hampshire.
No. No volume.
Still very low. I'm sorry.
Shall I start singing? What do you think? I'll
Can't
just go
hear
for
you.
it.
Say it.
Go for it.
Put away all of your angry. Put away all of your sad. Put away all of the winter. The dream you had, and take out this little seed. The hope that we all need. I will love you to the moon. To the moon on the mornings when you're feeling old. All the warnings you were ever told, they seem to be coming true. To the moon when you can't remember how or why. Love might hang in your sky. And put away all your receipts, what you owe and what you'll keep, how you plan to survive when the drop is sudden and steep. And let the afternoon come, maybe not get anything done. I will love you to the moon. To the moon on the mornings when you're feeling old. All the warnings you were ever told, they seem to be coming true. To the moon when you can't remember how or why. Love might hang in your sky. And sing with all the space inside. Let it fall out. Don't even try for the back of the room or the notes way up high. And let it vibrate in your chest. Maybe this song will help you rest. I will love you to the moon. To the moon on the mornings when you're feeling old. All the warnings you were ever told, they seem to be coming true. To the moon when you can't remember how or why. Love might hang in your sky. Thank you, everybody.
Cosy Sheridan and Charlie Koch this morning. Thank you. Thank you. Well, this is time for announcements and show and tell. Again, I'll tell you that our newsletter is out, and we are just so happy about a whole bunch of upcoming events. The one that really stands out is the one that just happened. Barely in time to just mention it in the letter. It's not in. This is October and November, but it's December 13th. We are awarding our annual Sacco and Vanzetti Memorial Award for Social Justice to Daniel Ellsberg. And Daniel Ellsberg, who spoke here, it turns out, 50 years ago, I, by coincidence, have been quite a lot in the archives of this church. There's 100 years of archives that were kind of stashed away in a closet for many years, and we have them all spread out. And there's an incredible amount of recordings. And we found a 1971, May 1971 recording of Daniel Ellsberg. It was right before the Pentagon Papers came out. And we had this connection, found his email address, and through a speaker here, Ray McGovern, who's friendly with him, and we made a connection with Daniel Ellsberg, and he was very excited to hear this cassette of his talk 50 years ago, and to add it to his own archive of papers that are at UMass Amherst. So that's just a really wonderful thing, wonderful little coup to have Daniel Ellsberg with us on December 13th, and also just to remember in that same thought the present Daniel Ellsbergs, which are suffering even more than he did, that are actually in prison, like Julian Assange and Ed Snowden, who's in exile in Russia, and Chelsea Manning, who is out of prison and then was back into prison, and I believe is out again. But those are all these whistleblowers who we remember and recognize. So I've got a couple other little items in the morning show and tell, and I think Cosy and Charlie will especially appreciate this one. If you can see it, this one is designed by Bennett Hammond, who in a sense brought us together. Bennett and Lorraine Hammond organized the Summer Acoustic Music Week. And this is a lawn sign, and I'll show you what I put on the back. I take this lawn sign to Summer Market as well. It says R.I.P. RBG. So I thank Bennett Hammond for that. There are also postcards, and we're sending out the postcards as well to all of our correspondents. And so that's one piece of show and tell. The other piece is this, which I just picked up from the frame shop. And this is a copy that I found intact from 1921 in our archives of our articles of incorporation with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I'll read what it says. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts, be it known that whereas, and here it has the names of all of the founders of the church. 1920, they got their act together in 1921 to actually get legally incorporated. But it says, have associated themselves with the intention of forming a corporation under the name of the Community Church of Boston for the purpose of the following. The Community Church shall be a free fellowship of men and women dedicated to the fulfillment of social idealism through common service for the common good. It seeks to cultivate the open mind, the aspiring spirit, the passion for justice, and the application of the cooperative principle to all forms of social and economic life. And now it's framed for our wall. It was in a folder since 1921, so it's fitting that we found it on our 100th anniversary. And I'm going to put it aside here somewhere so it doesn't fall down and break, and go on to our next part of our Sunday morning, which is to light a candle. And light a candle thinking of someday we'll be together together again in this lonely room, this beautiful auditorium that is sort of. I'm really enjoying that I have this huge office. I have my stuff spread out all over tables everywhere, but it wants to once again be a meeting and organizing room for radical activism, and to bring us together in unity, inspired by this flame. If I stood out in the rain, night, my only light a candle a million miles away, would you lay down your fire as I raised mine? Would you never kill again? That's the words of Cindy Callett that I recorded a long time ago. So with that, why don't we get started with one more little reading, and then a couple of songs from Cosy and Charlie. I'm going to put this candle aside so it doesn't spill wax all over the place, and take out a daily reading. I've loved finding this book by Eduardo Galeano, Uruguayan author of history and nonfiction. He was a columnist, and I've loved him for many years since I found this book, three-volume book that was called Memories of Fire. That's a history of the Americas told in little vignettes, kind of like what is in this book. Short vignettes. It's a beautiful set of books. This one is called Children of the Days, and it's like a day book. And I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to look for October 4th and read it to you. I hope it's appropriate and not inappropriate, I guess. So October 4th is called World Animal Day. Until some time ago, many Europeans thought animals were demons in disguise. The execution of bedeviled beasts by hanging or by fire was a public spectacle as popular as the burning of Satan-loving witches. On April 18th, 1499, in the French abbey of Josaphat near Chartres, a 3-month-old pig was tried in court. Like all pigs, he had neither soul nor reason and was born to be eaten. But instead of being eaten, he ate. He was accused of having had a child for lunch. The charge was not based on any evidence. Yet the little pig was still found guilty. Lacking proof, prosecuting attorney Jean Lavoisier, a graduate in law and chief magistrate at the monastery of Saint-Martin-de-Léon, revealed that the devouring had taken place on Good Friday. Then the judge passed sentence: capital punishment. October 4th, World Animal Day, from Eduardo Galeano. Cosy and Charlie, give us a musical message, couple songs. Okay. Thank you for being with us.
I was told that our volume was a little low, so we've turned it up. We'll see how it goes. Sorry about that. Well, we're so glad to be here. I want to thank Dean for inviting us to come be part of the service today. And because I knew that Pam was our speaker and her subject of women's suffrage, I have a couple songs here that are songs that I have done, both inspired sort of by being the daughter of my mother. We're all the child of some parent. And the parent that we have was often our first vision of, adult manhood or adult womanhood. And this first song I wrote as a younger woman, trying to find myself in comparison to the womanhood that I had seen in the neighborhood I grew up in and the family that I came from, and in trying to discover what would feel authentic to me. And I think that's a great thing that a lot of women are searching for often, for how do you become an authentic person in this world. There's so many visions of what you could be that you can fit into, but how do you find your own shape and size and personhood? This is called Demeter's Lost Daughter. Follow me down to the river Styx and look deep into the water. Persephone appears on the riverbank, tell her I am another lost daughter. Tell her my life never looked anything like my mother's. I never fit in to the tribe. I have come down to ask the underworld how to be more alive. I think I found the answer. It's a bit of a surprise. We are blessed when we are fallen. We don't always have to rise. And I'll be the queen of the bump in the road of the heroes who never win. I will be proud to be called a woman with a belly she is not holding in. I think I found the answer. It's a bit of a surprise. We are blessed when we are fallen. We don't always have to rise. There's a certain sense of freedom in a total loss of hope. And you can miss a lot when you tie a knot in the end of every rope. I think I found the answer. It's a bit of a surprise. We are blessed when we are fallen. We don't always have to rise. Thank you. So I've always been very taken with the image of Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, who is lost and ends up being lost by being attracted to things that maybe are dangerous. But that just is sort of how we find our way out into the world, I think, sometimes. And when we are told so often to rise, and going down into the underworld is a tremendous way to learn about yourself. This is the other song I'd like to sing for you, which is written much later in my life. After yet again learning about what it was that the vision of my mother was doing for me for being an independent person in the world. I am a traveling musician, or I will be again once the pandemic is over. And I chose not to have a life where I would do a lot of the things that I saw my mother doing. And I felt that my mother had been trapped into a life job description by her life and her times that she didn't know how to get out of. And I think she would have wanted to be. So this is based on the fact that Charlie and I, every 6 to 8 months, when we first got together, would have a discussion about the dishes. Who would do them, when we would do them, would you do them together, how this happened. And we came from very different families. Charlie grew up with 10 brothers and sisters, and he raised 4 daughters. So a lot of rules around dishes made a lot of sense for his lifestyle. And I have always mostly been a single person. I have no children. And I'm kind of a feral animal in the kitchen. So we had 2 very different ways of approaching doing dishes, and it became a little bit of an issue. And I would go have these very long journal entries after we had these arguments. And I would be writing and trying to say, why am I determined to die on the hill of dishes? Why is it so important to me? And as I've often found with creativity and songwriting, I found the answer in writing the song. So this is called I Leave Dishes in the Sink. I leave dishes in the sink. It bothers you a lot. It would be better if I did not leave dishes in the sink. I think we agree the sink means one thing to you and another to me. I leave dishes in the sink. My mother was a housewife, trapped in a time that said, here is your life in dishes and cleaning. She found little meaning, but my mother stood at the sink. Dishwasher could make this problem go away, but I remember my mother. Every day she would reach and bend, load and unload again. My mother stood at the sink, 'cause she was married to a man who was raised to think that what he did all day meant he didn't have to stand at the sink or the dustpan or the broom. My mother taught me every day you clean one room. So I built myself a life with few dishes to do, 'cause when I stand at the sink, it's like she's standing there too. And I fall on my knees and I praise the day I can leave the sink and walk away. One dish, one room, one day after another I leave dishes in the sink to rescue my mother.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cosy, Charlie. Beautiful. I want to urge everybody to look into some of Cosy's recordings. This is the one that I'm listening to in the car a lot. It's called Eros. It's from 2008. It has on the back another story from Greek mythology about Psyche and a beautiful young girl. And there are many other CDs, probably most available directly from Cosy right now. CD Baby kind of went away. I don't know if you were there, but anyway, I don't want to talk about that. What I want to talk about is how much I love your music, and also want to introduce Pam, who is with us today. We're just so happy that we get to do this program. Community Church is 100 years old, and women's suffrage is 100 years old. I was recommended about this program by a mutual friend named David Goulet, who is a retired Simmons professor, who is also deep into poetry and theater, and told me about Pam. And I want to introduce Pam by just telling you about her. She is a resident scholar at Brandeis Women's Studies Research Center. She is currently researching the suffrage movement and her grandmother, Betty Graham Swing. Pam's upcoming creative nonfiction book will chronicle her grandmother's journey to become a suffragist. Pam is also a musician, a folklorist, and has researched extensively the Shetland Isles of Scotland's tradition of fiddle music. We'll have to have you come play sometime as well, Pam. So we welcome you, Pam, and thanks for being with us this morning.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. Cosy, I'm loving hearing your music. So thank you so much. So I'm going to talk today about my research into my grandmother, Betty Graham Swing. And I'm also going to discuss a little known incident in the suffrage movement, which happened in Boston in 1919. And we'll show a few excerpts from my play, I Want to Go to Jail, that's based on that incident. So because I knew my grandmother personally, I have a direct link to events of 100 years ago. And it's been key to my realization that all history is personal. The suffrage movement was successful because of the actions of living, breathing women. And the struggle continues today in our country with ongoing issues of voter suppression and women's rights. My relationship with my grandmother has gone through many different phases, and I've given them labels. So childhood. So I knew my grandmother until I was almost 16. I called her Grammy Graham, and I loved to go visit her. She was a great cook, and she lived in an antique colonial house in Connecticut with wide floorboards and big fireplaces that I loved to go explore. She would sing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot to me and rock me in a hammock. So I have very fond memories of her. She was my father's mother, and he made sure that I knew that she had been a suffragist, that she had gone to jail, she had been on a hunger strike. I was very proud of her, but I really didn't know any of the details of that. Okay, boxes. So about 10 years ago, I've got a phone call from my cousin who inherited her house saying, you have to come pick up all the boxes of your grandmother's papers and get them out of the house before we start renovations in 2 days. So I drove to Connecticut, and I have to say, it was very disconcerting to see my grandmother's life reduced to boxes of papers. There's just something about that that was hard to see. But I packed them up and I brought them home to our tiny house in Concord, Massachusetts, and put them in the dining room. Wasn't any other place, where they became a topic of discussion, shall I say, between me and my husband as several years went by and the boxes remained in the dining room. All right, next, getting curious. So I didn't go through the boxes right away because I had all sorts of other things on my plate at the time, but eventually I got very curious about them and started going through them. They were full of letters and photos and other materials. And one of the things I was looking for was her memoir. I knew she'd been writing a memoir, and I expected to find a sheath of manuscript paper, at least this thick, that would give me everything I needed to know about her life. I couldn't find it. All I found was 6 typewritten pages about an experience she had of being in jail with no dates, no context, nothing. And it was interesting, but I didn't know what to do with it, so I put it aside. I had begun to realize that I really knew very little about the suffrage movement, and I started reading everything I could lay my hands on about it. About a year later, I was reading Jailed for Freedom by Doris Stevens, which is a contemporary account of the suffrage movement. And she was describing what suffragists called the Night of Terror, which was a moment when suffragists who had been sent to jail were beaten up by hired men at the Occoquan workhouse to teach those suffragists a lesson. It started sounding familiar. And I went back and I looked at those 6 typewritten pages again. And oh my God, my grandmother had been there. She had been part of the Night of Terror. And that sort of like woke up the whole thing for me. And I couldn't believe it. All right, yellow legal pads. So I also looked more closely at some material that was handwritten on yellow legal pads that I had initially set aside. And I realized that they contained rough drafts of a few chapters of her memoir. And my daughter and I spent a summer transcribing them. It was pretty difficult. Her handwriting is terrible. They were a treasure trove. I learned that her parents both came over from Denmark and married in the United States. They raised a family of 7 children in Omaha, Nebraska, and then Portland, Oregon. Betty was born in 1893. Her sister Alice was born exactly to the day 2 years later, and they were so close they were called the Graham twins. All of this was totally new information for me. It gave me new insights into my grandmother, but it also raised questions. I especially became curious about why she decided to become a suffragist. And so here are a few quotes from her childhood and young adulthood that kind of lay that path out a little bit. My happiest memories go back to our Nebraska farm. I loved the big windmill that flapped its silver wings against the blue sky high above the trees that gave the place its title, Elm Tree Fruit Farm. We would invite children from the village school to picnic. They drove out in wagons and two-seated buggies. My mother's warm hospitality and generous contributions of cake and cookies soon spread around the countryside, and our park became the favorite picnic ground for miles around. They moved to Portland when Betty was about 11. And it had a lot to offer her. She loved all the mountains, especially Mount Hood. And she said that school was active and joyous, but she also encountered prejudice against recent immigrants that would later, later fuel her concern for social justice. A sense of shame arose about our parents, the fact that their forebears had not come over on the Mayflower, or at least in the early 1700s. This snobbishness came from history class in school. Unless you could claim, no matter how remote, some connection with the founding fathers, you were not an aristocrat. You could never belong. It became necessary to hide the past from our friends, that our parents had themselves come over from the old country. Her awakening to social issues continued. After a year of college, now 20 years old, she taught in several schools, including at a detention home associated with the newly formed juvenile court. And she was introduced to a different side of Portland than the one she had experienced in her middle-class upbringing. I blamed society for permitting so many of its young citizens to live in conditions of poverty. I started questioning our type of government, our institutions, and especially the part women should and could play in bettering the body politic. Something was patently wrong. I got my first overpowering sense of indignation at the inequalities which existed in the rights of women in the so-called democracy of the US of A. So Betty, by now, as I say, is in her early 20s. She really yearned to do something important with her life, but she wasn't sure what it was. She became involved with the suffrage movement somewhat at this point. And looking back on those days, she said, I can trace the pattern of my desire to make women aware of their social responsibilities and the necessity of educating themselves for something more rewarding than marriage and the confines of four walls. But then she had some kind of an identity crisis, which fascinates me. I had made friends with the mother of one of my schoolmates who was a feminist. Her first interest was in youth and then in the campaign for votes for women. She became my mentor during the formulation of many of my revolutionary ideals concerning education and government reforms. My overwhelming emotional reaction to all of this was one of complete inadequacy, which tormented me to distraction, so that I was easy prey to the suggestion that I throw it all up and accompany a friend to New York to continue my study of singing. So she did this abrupt 180. She could not bring herself to commit to the suffrage movement at that time, and she went off to New York City to study singing. I would love to, she had written more about this moment. I would love to have known what was really going on inside of her. As it turned out, she loved her newfound independence in New York City. It was really good for her to get away from Portland and her family. She began landing roles in Broadway musicals. Yet, only a year later, she walked away from her blossoming life there and joined the suffrage movement and never looked back. Here's how she described it in a speech that she gave in 1934 at a National Woman's Party gathering. Just 17 years ago this month, I abandoned a Broadway engagement, which was to launch me on my career as a full-fledged actress, and answered the call to picket the White House for national suffrage. I caught the fastest train to Washington and there joined the front line. After our arrest and imprisonment and 8 days hunger strike, we were released. A picket dinner was held in our honor, and to my great embarrassment, I was unexpectedly called on to make my first Woman's Party speech. It was a dark hour. The Great War was being waged in Europe, and the United States had just gone in. Women everywhere were throwing themselves into war work. Only one small group dared to raise its voice in all that turmoil, and we were that group. We dared to call out to a bewildered world, women must be free, and we won. My grandmother loved giving speeches. So the National Woman's Party, the one small group that she was referring to was the National Woman's Party. They were the militant suffragists, what we would call today activists. Their leader was a young woman named Alice Paul. She broke away from the National American Woman Suffrage Association, which was the more conservative suffrage group that was trying to win suffrage in every state. And it was also the much, much larger group. Alice Paul recognized that going state by state was going to take a very long time, and some states might never grant the right to vote to women. So she advocated for getting a constitutional amendment instead, and ultimately formed her own organization to do so. Alice Paul was a brilliant strategist. She was also a birthright Quaker, so she was committed to nonviolence. When President Wilson and Congress refused to support the amendment, she decided to get their attention through activism. She adapted suffrage militant tactics from England and came up with ideas of her own. She held huge parades. She burned President Wilson's words. One of her most well-known tactics was to start picketing the White House in 1917, which had never been done before. The Silent Sentinels, as they were called, picketed the White House 6 days a week. And this was the group that Betty Graham joined on November 10th, 1917. Betty emerged from the night of terror and her hunger strike in jail a complete enthusiast. She joined the Woman's Party. She became a national organizer for them for the last 3 years of the suffrage movement. She traveled the country organizing local branches of the Woman's Party. She became known as the singing suffragist for singing suffrage songs that were sung in jail at her speeches. She couldn't have known it then, but she would continue to work with Alice Paul for the next 40 years on other issues of women's rights, both nationally and internationally, including the Equal Rights Amendment. As I learned more, I began to realize that Alice Paul's tactics were controversial at the time. Alice Paul wanted to get right in President Wilson's face and force him to confront the issue of women's right to vote. The conservative suffrage group hated what she was doing, even though they came around to supporting a constitutional amendment. They just wanted to be more, if I may say so, more ladylike about it. The press didn't approve and often refused to cover Women's Party activities. President Wilson for sure didn't like it. He was lukewarm at best about suffrage and had other problems on his plate, especially once the United States entered the Great War in April of 1917. This rift between these two suffrage groups showed up in scholarship about the suffrage movement as well. And it was kind of fascinating for me to start realizing that's what I was seeing. Some books would not even mention Alice Paul. Others would do it in a dismissive way. It's only more recently that Alice Paul has received more attention, and that there has been a more balanced view of the contributions of both groups. Now we're going to fast forward 100 years. At a certain point, I began to play around with ways that I could bring what I was learning about the suffrage movement and my grandmother out into the world. In 2017, I decided to do a reenactment of the 1917 White House picketing that led to the Night of Terror. I gathered a group of women and we met in Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C., outside the National Woman's Party 1917 headquarters, better known as the Dolly Madison House. We marched the block and a half to the White House wearing suffrage sashes. 3 years later, President Trump would trace that same route in the opposite direction, headed for St. John's Episcopal Church, after nonviolent Black Lives Matter protesters were forcibly cleared from Lafayette Park. It would appear that our nation still has a way to go to honor and respect nonviolent protests. After that, we drove to Lorton, Virginia, to the Occoquan Workhouse, now the Workhouse Art Center, to tour the small museum there, which included exhibits about the Night of Terror. The next centennial that I wanted to mark was the only time suffragists picketed outside of Washington, D.C. On February 24th, 1919, 22 suffragists were arrested for attempting to picket Woodrow Wilson outside the Massachusetts State House. Betty Graham was one of them. They were sentenced to 8 days in the Charles Street jail. Alice Paul wanted President Wilson to help convince one more United States senator to vote for the 19th Amendment. It had been passed by the House, but it needed one more vote in the Senate before it could go to the states for ratification. Wilson was just returning from 3 months abroad at the Paris Peace Conference, part of the aftermath of the Great War. By this time, he had committed to supporting the 19th Amendment, but he was still very preoccupied with post-war negotiations. Boston invited tens of thousands of people to cheer his motorcade as he drove through the streets of Boston from the harbor where his ship had docked. And I just have to say as an aside here that that happened in February of 1919. In September and October 1918 was when the Spanish flu pandemic was at its worst. And Boston was basically totally shut down. Thousands of people died. It was a much worse illness than what we're experiencing. And it eventually burned itself out so that by February of 1919, it was still around in pockets, but it wasn't as much of an issue anymore. So back to my reenactment idea. Freddie Kay, president of the Massachusetts Suffrage Centennial Organization, was enthusiastic about staging a reenactment of this event. The only problem was I couldn't figure out what the reenactment might look like. Plus, Boston in February is not the best time to stage an outdoor event and expect crowds. In the fall of 2018, a Brandeis work-study student, Lizzie DeBonca, and I pulled together everything we could find out about the incident and made a timeline, but we couldn't get traction on a reenactment either. Finally, one day I suggested we try writing a play. We opened up a Google Doc on both our computers. We sat next to each other, but we could each see the lines appearing on the screen as we wrote. And we started brainstorming. One of us wrote, "Woman 1, I hear President Wilson's coming to town." The next one wrote, "Woman 2, it's about time he paid attention to our country." Woman 3, "Yeah, to the woman in his country." We were off and running. And it took a lot of work, but we really did write this play together. And it was performed as a staged reading at Brandeis and at the Massachusetts State House indoors in February of 2019, and it's been performed a number of times since. So we're going to see a few scenes from this play, but before I set the scene for you, I need to talk about who is not in the play. There were no African-American suffragists included in this picket line. There could have been. Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin, her daughter, Florida Ruffin Ridley, and her daughter's friend, Mariah Baldwin, to name just 3, were all renowned local African-American activists at that time. Not only that, but Boston in the late 1800s and early 1900s, while it absolutely had systemic racism, also had collaborative relationships between white and Black abolitionists and women's rights advocates. But Alice Paul, acting from both personal prejudice and strategical tactics, would not have considered including them. So my co-playwright, Lizzie DeBanca, and I wanted to signal our awareness of the exclusion of Blacks from the suffrage movement in general and from this incident. And you'll see how we worked this incident into the start of scene 2. We also, when possible, tried to have a diverse cast as a way of saying diversity in the suffrage movement could have been possible. So I'm going to tell you who the suffragists are in the play in hopes that you'll be able to figure them out when you actually see the scene. So there's Alice Paul, she's the bossy one. There's Catherine Morey, she's also a bit bossy as the head of the Boston branch of the Women's Party. Lucy Daniels, she's an older suffragist from Vermont who is an outspoken advocate for including African-American women in the suffrage movement. Mrs. Rosa Rower, from a Bostonian family of both abolitionists and suffragists. Betty Graham, who you've already met, and Martha Foley, a young woman who has never done anything like this before. We're going to start with scene 2, but I have to tell you what happened in scene 1. So in scene 1, the suffragists are gathering at the National Woman Party headquarters, and they're getting ready to pick the following day. Martha Foley enters and says she's interested in picketing. She's less sure when she hears that they're going to be arrested. Betty Graham arrives with the news that because of an assassination attempt on the French Prime Minister, military will line the parade route. The suffragists will have to pass through a line of soldiers to get to the State House. This causes concern, but Alice Paul overrides their worries. The scene ends with Betty Graham counseling Martha Foley about whether to join the picket line. Martha Foley confides that her dream is to become a writer, but her father won't hear of it. She wants more for women, but she still isn't sure whether to picket. Betty suggests she sleep on it, that it has to feel right for her. Okay, so now we are going to see scenes 2, 3, and 4, one after another.
Her screen froze. Hi. Dean needs to be unmuted.
Dean, are you having a problem?
He's frozen. Unmute.
Okay.
Unmute. Ask to unmute. Just look.
Is it playing?
No, you've got to share your screen, I think.
Oh, I thought I did. Okay, sorry.
Better go
Should
back
we
to the
start
beginning
it?
of the scene too.
Let's start it again.
If we include Negroes.
I think that is extremely short.
Scene 2.
Okay?
National Women's Party headquarters next day.
Full screen, Dean.
Did anyone else sign up to picket? Since yesterday, I really want a good showing.
We could easily add to our numbers by asking Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin to reach out to the others, to the local Negro suffragists.
That is a great idea.
I wish we could. The problem is, the southern states would not support our cause if we include Negroes.
I think that is extremely short-sighted of today's suffrage movement. Here in New England, Lucy Stone worked with abolitionists to fight for Negro and women's rights together.
Once the vote is granted to women, Negro women will be able to vote as well.
I'm not so sure about that. The southern states are already blocking Negro men from voting with their Jim Crow laws.
This is really an important topic. There is no easy solution, but there's a lot at stake, and our plan is to picket President Wilson, and I think we have to focus on that right now.
Oh, good, you're here. I'm so glad you decided to come.
I had to sneak out of the house, but I truly do want to be here. I was awake most of the night thinking about our conversation. And you know what I decided? I can combine being a suffragist with being a writer. I'm going to write about what happens to me. I'm so excited.
That is a really fantastic idea. Here, I saved a sash for you.
Ladies, let's talk about our strategy for today. I think it would look much more dignified not to smile.
And determined. Keep moving and try to slip past the line of Marines without provoking them. Then stand in front of the State House in silence. I'll be off to the side. I'm hoping I can convince the police not to arrest you until after President Wilson passes by.
We do expect to be arrested at some point. Offer no resistance.
No resistance to getting arrested? That's not how we've been doing it in front of the White House. Boston is just too stuffy for words.
Betty, I've picketed the White House even more than you have. Boston is different. We've told the police that we're not trying to cause trouble. We will be more effective if we behave with dignity.
It depends. We don't want to seem like we're just giving in.
Oh, Catherine, I'm scared that we're going too far. This could be dangerous.
I know. I couldn't sleep last night worrying about it.
But what do we do? Miss Paul is absolutely set on picketing today.
I'm not sure.
May I have your attention, please? I do so wish I could picket with you today. I love holding a banner high for the world to see, and I would willingly go to jail again. But strategically, I am most useful if I can lobby the Senate next week, and I can't do that from a jail cell. Once we get that one last vote, the suffrage amendment can go to the states for ratification.
Miss Paul, some of us are still worried about getting past the soldiers.
I've been thinking about that too. We'll be arriving at the State House long before the president is expected, and he is the focus of their concern. I really think you will be okay if you just march right through their line and act as though you belong there. Okay, everyone, line up. Today could be the day that makes the difference for ourselves and for generations of women to come in this country. Wilson claims that now he supports suffrage. Let's let him prove it to us.
Lucy Stone would be rolling over in her grave if she realized women still don't have the right to vote after almost 70 years of trying.
Lori leads with the American flag, followed by the others with purple, white, and gold banners, and the large sign with a message to President Wilson. I Want to Go to Jail, a play in one act by Pam Swing and Elizabeth. Police Commissioner Curtis enters.
Miss Paul, these ladies have to leave before the president's motorcade arrives. or they shall be arrested for loitering.
They have a right to be here. It's our right as citizens to peaceably demonstrate.
Miss Paul, we're serious. Your group cannot remain here.
Fellow suffragists, ignore him. To carry out our plans.
Ladies, if you do not leave, you shall be arrested for loitering. Ladies, I hereby arrest you for loitering in public. Ma'am, you're under arrest.
Don't you dare touch me. You're violating my First Amendment rights.
I'm sorry, but you're coming with me. Officer, I need your assistance. Take these other women into custody.
Ma'am, I have to place you under arrest. Don't tell my superior, but I'm with you, ladies. My sister wants to vote too.
Tell her to get in touch with us.
Scene 4, next day, courtroom of the Pemberton Square Courthouse, which has just been cleared of all spectators, including Alice Paul and the press.
Hear ye, hear ye. All rise. All persons having anything to do before the Honorable Chief Bolster of the Municipal Court for Suffolk County Criminal Division, draw near. Give your attendance, and you shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
We are here today in the arraignment of the defendants on the charge of loitering more than 7 minutes. The defendants shall approach the bench one at a time. What is your name?
As an American citizen under arrest, I demand a public trial.
Defendant is to answer the question put before her. What is your name?
My name is Jane Doe.
What is your name?
As an American citizen under arrest, I demand a public trial.
Defendant is to answer the question put before her. What is your name?
My name is Jane Doe.
Are you all Jane Doe?
Yes.
You are hereby charged with a violation of a City of Boston ordinance by loitering in a public space. How do you plead?
Why do you single us out for loitering? All of Boston was loitering, waiting for the parade to start.
You are the ones who have been charged and are appearing before me. I ask you again, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
You have the right to appeal any conviction and sentence.
We refuse our right of appeal. We were loitering for liberty.
In that case, I find you all guilty and sentence all of you to $5 fine or 8 days in the Charles Street Jail.
We want to go to jail.
Okay, so they're sent off to the Charles Street Jail, which I trust you all realize is nowadays is the Liberty Hotel. And it's fun to go there, by the way, because you can see walls of the Charles Street Jail are still retained there. And they're not actually treated that badly there. It's not a repeat of Occoquan at all, but there are other challenges. Martha Foley, the next morning, her father comes and pays her fine and makes her leave. She is utterly furious. she, had made this choice to join, and then her father is doing her out of it. And then the next scene we're going to see, something happens to Catherine Morey. So now we can see scene 8.
Dean, you got to share your screen again, I think.
Scene 8, Sheriff Kelleher's office at Charles Street Jail.
Why have I been brought here?
Your fine has been paid. You're free to go.
What do you mean my fine has been paid?
You have a mysterious benefactor.
No one can pay our fines without our consent.
What's your problem? Usually people can't wait to get out of jail.
I don't believe my fine has been paid at all. The authorities just want to be rid of us because we are a publicity crisis.
All I can say is that a man wearing glasses and a dark overcoat came in this afternoon and said he was here to pay the fine for you.
I demand to know who he is. He is violating my rights as a citizen.
If I had refused to accept the money, I would have been violating the law. Once the fine is paid, I can't keep you in jail.
I will not leave this jail until the others come with me.
I'm sorry, but their fine wasn't paid. Yours was. You have to go.
I absolutely refuse to leave.
Why? Please tell me. Would you want to stay in jail? You've been complaining nonstop about the conditions.
We had a legal right to picket. We should never have been arrested in the first place. But since we have been, we want the world to know what we're up against when we ask for basic rights.
Please don't compel me to use force.
I am not leaving this jail.
You give me no choice. I regret this exceedingly. Officer, Miss Morey refuses to leave on her own accord. We will have to escort her out.
Okay, so that picture that you saw at the end is from a newspaper article, and it's Catherine Morey being deposited outside the Charles Street Jail, where she refused to leave for a number of hours. Anyway, that's all we're going to see from the play today. If you'd like to see the whole play, you can see it on my website, which is www, all one word, iwanttogotojail.com. That same performance. And there's just one more thing that I want to say before my segment is over, and that is that in the wake of protests after George Floyd's murder, I found myself imagining ways that I could add scenes to this play that would tackle the systemic racism in the suffrage movement with more depth. And I started imagining an act 2 with an alternative version of events. What if it had been Black suffragists who planned to picket and white suffragists came and asked if they could be included? What would the dynamics be? What would the tension points be? Would they find a way to work together? Would it end some other way? If Alice Paul were one of them, what would she say? What would Betty Graham say? So maybe someday I'll actually try to write that. At the moment, it's still in my head. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Pam. Let's give Pam a hand, a virtual hand, for joining us. And we're going to hear one last time from Cosy and Charlie, but first I'm going to hold up this beautiful collection basket. It's from some craftswomen in Uganda, and I'm going to put my own check in here and encourage you to either write a check and send it to Community Church of Boston, 565 Boylston Street, Boston, Massachusetts, 02116. That's the old-fashioned way of doing it, and you can also go to our website, and there is a function there to donate by credit card or PayPal. So we need your help during this difficult time. We rely on the restaurant rental income from the first floor. The restaurant was closed for 3 months, and we had to make arrangements to take a huge rental cut from them. And so be generous when you think of Community Church. We'll be back in action pretty soon, but that's what I say during our moment here of what we call the offertory, during which we hear from our musicians, Cosy and Charlie, for one last song. And thank you again, Cosy, for joining us. And thanks, Pam, and we'll come back for some Q&A after Cosy and Charlie's last song.
Thank you, Dean. Well, because Dean mentioned the CD he held up and Pam's story made me think we would go out on this is the story of Psyche, who is a young woman who falls in love with perhaps an idea. You can often say that Psyche falls in love with the god of love, but she has a relationship with a great thing she wants. And the god of love, Eros, disappoints her after, and she wanders the world trying to find this god that she has fallen in love with. And throughout her life, she becomes an independent woman by learning to do these impossible jobs that are set before her before she's able to get that thing she says she wants. But the really interesting thing, sort of going together here with Pam's story, is that Psyche in the beginning is a young woman whose community finds her threatening, and so they decide she will be the scapegoat. And they tie her to a rock in the ocean where she will be eaten by a monster, and this will make all the bad things go away from their village. What happens is Psyche is tied out there, and she is actually rescued by a god, the god of love, who will then disappoint her. Because this is the theory, this is the cycle of relationship in life, where we find something, there's a beautiful romantic opening with whatever it is, the idea, the person, and then there is a moment of disappointment when it's not a perfect thing, and then there is the adulthood of discovering how you can have a real relationship with whatever it is, which is a process of learning about standing up for yourself and negotiation and compromise and all those things. And that's a long introduction for the fact that this song is either about the story of Psyche, who is abandoned by her community and tied on a rock so that the god of love can find her, or it's the story of a woman who drops out of college to become a folk singer.
What you need to know is I was very young when they tied me to a rock out at sea. They told me I was saving everyone. At the time that seemed acceptable to me. They said I was a seed of misfortune. And then they piled all their sins on my head. What you need to know is I was very young, so I believed every word they said. When he found me in the darkness, what I saw were feathers and light. We were both young then, all he probably intended was to take me home for the night. I stayed in his room, I had nowhere to go, and he was kind, so he let me stay. But all I knew about love was rescue. So one night he flew away. Maybe I was a seed of misfortune, if I could scare off the god of love. But I'd been offered a cup, and who would give up on something that fell from above. And when I went to find him, I found the whole world instead. And that's more of a wonder than feathers and light or the God of love in my bed. And on the day that I found him, and I am sure he was the same young man, but when I mentioned the rescue and the feathers and light, he did not understand. But some nights I have a dream where what was lost is found again, and I am enfolded with something that wakes me happy as I have ever been. I have seen the curtain swing open, I have seen that it is all right, and that I am not the seed of misfortune, that I am the feathers and light.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
We enjoyed being part of this. Thank you.
Cosy and Charlie, we love you, and we hope to see you in person right here in this room when we can all be together again. Thanks again. I want to open the floor for any questions, comments, thoughts about the 100th anniversary of Suffrage and about Pam's wonderful play. And I had a quick question. On the documentary that was on PBS, they talked a little bit about the one reason for opposition to suffrage being that it was connected to the temperance movement. And I wonder if that was something that was a different part of the country, or if that was in your grandmother's intentions about suffrage as well.
Well, she didn't care about temperance one way or another, but she did have to contend with the liquor interests when they were trying to get the amendment ratified by different state legislators. All the liquor companies would go and try and convince the legislators to vote against the amendment because they worried that if women got the right to vote, that their business would suffer.
Did that have anything to do with the reason Prohibition was passed?
I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but I mean, women definitely had a lot to do with why Prohibition was passed. And they saw that men's lives were being ruined in many cases by drink. But it was not directly linked to suffrage. That's my understanding. I'm sure there's a more nuanced answer to that.
Mm-hmm. Well, if there is anybody else who would like to ask a question or make a comment, you can either do it through the chat function or else just raise your hand right here in the screen. I think I saw somebody's hand.
Judith Walcott?
Yes, Judy. Hi, Judy.
First of all, thank you very much. The play was wonderful, and I really enjoyed it. And Gertrude Winslow is my grandmother, and you sent a letter to Dean, or a part of a thing that she sent that was in the paper.
That's right.
And I have not had time. I mean, my daughter and I have started. I've been involved in something else at the moment, but we're very confused about where she stood now in this. I mean, she was involved with Sacco Vanzetti in the church, but I mean, have you come up with anything more?
I haven't.
And we need her letter. That was the response.
Right.
What we don't have is her letter.
Right.
And people are kind of searching around.
Yeah, I'm for some reason have been kicked off of the Boston Globe search thing for archives, so I would have gone further, but I've been trying for months to get back on.
And I wasn't sure if it was the Globe or the Herald, and I can't remember.
You should check both.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
okay.
Absolutely, yeah, no, there's something interesting going on there. It'd be worth it figuring it out.
Yeah, that's what we all think, but we haven't gotten
Yeah.
very far. But this was great today. Thank you.
I will mention to anyone who doesn't know that Gertrude Winslow appears on this document, which we have just framed, as one of the founders of Community Church of Boston. I don't know if you can see her name there, but it's there, along with 6 other people, 3 of them being women. Gertrude Winslow, Irene Henderson, and Laura Kendrick. So that's a very interesting question about the connection between the founding of the church and the suffrage movement, and these 3 women who were on the founding charter, and what they were all about. It's a fascinating thing. Gertrude went on to be the very active with the church for decades, and basically the thing that held the thing together. There were a couple of ministers, but she ran the office and did a lot of the clerical work and the bookkeeping, all the way into the like the 40s or 50s, Judy?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, she died in 50. She died the night before Stephen said the 50s. I would say she died in 55, I think, or 56. Yeah. So probably up through the 40s anyway.
There's a lot more to find out about her in our archives, which we're just scratching the surface, especially in the minutes of the meetings where she's very active and busy, and a lot of writing by her. So that's just a little taste of what's in our archive.
Yeah, which I would love to come, once it gets things straightened out, and you're
absolutely
open up
anytime. Charlie.
Yes, I saw the PBS documentary as well, and thought Karen and I did. And I've got 2 questions. One, I wanted to ask you if you thought if there were any glaring admissions in it. The one thing I noticed, I don't think they placed the proper context of what was going on. The Russian Revolution happened just then, and with declaring full emancipation for women, and I think that was a serious background issue that they didn't touch.
Yeah, I agree that they should have done more with that. No, I don't have any other glaring things to say about that. I thought it was good. Any other questions? Nothing's showing up in chat.
Nothing else except that I would make the observation that was 100 years ago, and we can't help but ask ourselves, 100 years hence, what is it about now that will seem as glaringly unjust as the fact that 100 years ago women couldn't vote? And what is it that they will look upon us and say, what were they thinking? How could it possibly have been? You just assume that the arc of justice, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice, but then you have a blip like the most recent 4 years of U.S. history, and you think, does it continue to bend towards justice or not? And what will they look back on in 100 years?
All right.
Well, that's just a thought that I had every time I think about this 100-year anniversary. I think about that. So as a way of saying goodbye to everybody, and thank you for joining us, and tell the world about what's going on online, here's our newsletter. We'd be glad to get it to you either by email or by U.S. Postal Service. Next Sunday, the topic, I'll read the title, "There is Nothing Left to Colonize But Ourselves." The speaker is Hartman Dietz. He's from the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. He's a young leader. There's a beautiful picture of him. I'll show it to you as best I can. He's in his full regalia. Music is by another Wampanoag musician whose music I don't know. His name is Andre Longhart Gaines. Join us for Indigenous Peoples Day next Sunday, and a whole bunch more great things. Stephen Kinzer the Sunday after that. Three attorneys from Prison Legal Services the Sunday after that. And on November 1st, Jill Stein will be with us. All kinds of great music. And I want to go out on a quote from one of the founders of Community Church, Clarence Skinner, who says, "Out of the world's wide ways we come to this, our house of fellowship and aspiration. Here may the evils which beset us be banished by the power of justice, the fears that haunt us be overcome by fresh insight, the doubts that drive us be dissolved into finer faith. Here, each in our own way, yet together, let us for a brief time look into the mysteries of life's beginning, the source out of which the endless eons roll, and countless lives emerge, and with renewed hope, search through this maddening maze of things to find again life's aims and meaning, and above all, its glory." Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Cosy and Charlie. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you have a great week, and be well, and be safe. Our prayers, despite how much we hate the guy, is with our president, that he be better and that we whoop his butt on November 3rd. I'm sorry. I just had to say that. Meeting at the building is over. Love you all, and be well. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, could I say something, Dean, before you leave?
Yes, final words?
Yeah, no, it was just a final word. This is about me. Would you send me one of the bulletins of the community church?
Of course. And I believe we have your new address, and I will put it in the mail right now. I think you're on the mailing list, but I will send you another one, okay?
All right. Okay, good. Thank you.
Anybody else? Last goodbyes?
Pam, is your email on the website?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. If I need to. Okay,
Good.
thanks, Steve.
Okay, Judy, I'll send that to you as well.
Oh, good. Okay, thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.